The sound of splintering would echo through the living room like a gunshot. 15-year-old Maya Hartley watched in frozen horror as her stepmother, Patricia, brought the hammer down again on the upright piano that had belonged to Maya's late mother. Each strike sent ivory keys flying across the hardwood floor like scattered teeth. Patricia's face was twisted with rage, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the tool with surprising strength for someone who claimed delicate sensibilities. Maya's father stood in the doorway, briefcase still in hand from work, his mouth open but no words coming out. He had always been good at silence when it came to his second wife's tantrums. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had known the piano was in danger the moment Patricia announced they were redecorating the house. It had started innocently enough, with new curtains and fresh paint in the dining room. But Patricia had a way of starting small and consuming everything in her path, like a fire that begins with a single match and ends by devouring an entire forest. The piano had been Maya's sanctuary, the one place where her mother's presence still felt real and tangible. Eleanor Hartley had died when Maya was 11, a sudden aneurysm that took her in her sleep. One morning she was making pancakes and humming Chopin, and by evening she was gone. The piano had been Eleanor's most prized possession, a Yamaha upright that she had saved for years to buy. She had taught Maya to play on that piano, guiding her small fingers across the keys with infinite patience. Patricia had married Maya's father, Robert, just 18 months after Eleanor's death. She was younger than Robert by 12 years, blonde and polished in a way that seemed manufactured rather than natural. She wore designer clothes and spoke with an affected accent that Maya suspected she had picked up from watching British television dramas. Robert had met her at a pharmaceutical conference where he had been presenting research and she had been working as a marketing consultant. Maya remembered the first time her father brought Patricia home for dinner. She had smiled at Maya with teeth so white they seemed to glow, and said in that strange accent that they were going to be the best of friends. Maya had known immediately that this woman was not interested in friendship. She was interested in replacement. The first year of the marriage had been tense but manageable. Patricia made comments about Maya's clothes, her hair, her grades at school. She suggested that Maya might want to spend more time with friends her own age instead of sitting at that old piano for hours. She mentioned several times that the piano took up valuable space in the formal living room, space that could be better utilized for entertaining. Robert would nod along absently, more focused on his research than on the growing tension in his home. Maya learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to practice the piano only when Patricia was out of the house. But invisibility only works for so long. Patricia's resentment grew with each passing month. She began making more pointed comments about Eleanor, about how Robert needed to move on, about how keeping a shrine to his dead wife was unhealthy. The piano became the symbol of everything Patricia wanted to erase. It represented the woman who had been there first, who had been loved first, who had given Robert a child. Maya understood this instinctively, even at her young age. The piano was not just an instrument. It was proof that Patricia was not the first Mrs. Hartley, and that ate at her like acid. The destruction happened on a Tuesday evening in March. Maya had come home from school to find Patricia in an unusually foul mood. Her latest interior design project had been rejected by a magazine she had submitted it to, and she had been drinking wine since lunch. Robert was due home any minute, and Patricia was pacing the living room like a caged animal. Maya tried to slip past her to go upstairs, but Patricia's voice stopped her cold. She said Maya's constant playing was driving her insane. She said the piano was an eyesore. She said it was time to let go of the past. Maya had made the mistake of saying no, of telling Patricia that the piano had been her mother's and she had no right to touch it. That was when Patricia had gone to the garage and returned with the hammer. Robert arrived home just as Patricia was delivering the final blows to the instrument's internal structure. The strings made horrible twanging sounds as they snapped. The wooden frame cracked and splintered. Maya stood there crying, unable to move or speak. Robert set down his briefcase and asked Patricia what she was doing. His voice was calm, almost curious, as if he had walked in on her rearranging furniture rather than destroying his dead wife's piano. Patricia threw the hammer on the floor and said someone had to make the hard decisions in this family. She said someone had to help everyone move forward instead of living in the past. She said the piano was gone and that was that. Maya ran upstairs and locked herself in her bedroom. She could hear her father and Patricia arguing downstairs, but she knew how it would end. It always ended the same way. Robert would be upset for a few hours, then Patricia would cry and apologize, and he would forgive her. He would say she had been under stress. He would say she had been trying to help in her own way. He would say they all needed to be more understanding of each other. And the next day, the piano would be hauled away like garbage, and no one would speak of it again. That night, Maya made a decision. She would never forgive Patricia. She would never forgive her father for his weakness. And she would never touch a piano again. If she could not play her mother's piano, she would play no piano at all. It was the only form of control she had left. The only way to honor what had been taken from her. The years that followed were marked by a cold silence between Maya and her stepmother. They lived in the same house but existed in separate worlds. Maya threw herself into her studies, determined to leave for college as soon as possible. She avoided the living room where the piano had once stood, now replaced by a sleek modern sofa and abstract art that Patricia had chosen. She stopped listening to classical music. She stopped talking about her mother. She became exactly what Patricia wanted her to be, a ghost in her own home. Robert tried occasionally to bridge the gap between his daughter and his wife, but his efforts were half-hearted and quickly abandoned. He was not a man built for conflict. He preferred the orderly world of research and data, where problems had solutions and emotions could be set aside. He convinced himself that Maya was simply going through a teenage phase, that she would eventually come around and accept Patricia as part of the family. He did not see, or chose not to see, the permanent damage that had been done that March evening. Maya graduated high school with honors and won a full scholarship to a university 3 states away. She left home with minimal fanfare, packing her belongings into a single suitcase and leaving behind everything that connected her to the house on Maple Street. Patricia was visibly relieved to see her go. Robert hugged Maya at the airport and told her he was proud of her, but his eyes were distant, already thinking about getting back to his lab. Maya did not cry when she boarded the plane. She felt nothing but a cold determination to never look back. College was a revelation. Away from Patricia's constant criticism and her father's passive neglect, Maya began to rebuild herself. She majored in biology with plans to go to medical school, following in her father's footsteps despite her complicated feelings about him. She made friends, joined clubs, and dated occasionally, though she kept people at arm's length. She had learned early that letting people too close meant giving them the power to hurt you. She built walls around herself, high and strong, and told herself she was safer that way. She did not touch a piano for 7 years. She walked past music buildings on campus without a second glance. When friends invited her to concerts, she declined. When someone asked if she played any instruments, she said no. It was easier to pretend that part of her life had never existed than to confront what had been stolen from her. The grief she felt for her mother had become tangled up with the grief for her music, until she could not separate one from the other. So she buried both and told herself she was fine. But grief has a way of demanding attention, no matter how deeply you bury it. In her junior year of college, Maya was walking across campus when she heard someone playing piano through an open window. The music stopped her in her tracks. It was Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece her mother had been teaching her before she died. Maya stood frozen on the sidewalk, people flowing around her like water around a stone. The music filled something inside her that she had not realized was empty. It was like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. She found herself walking toward the music building without consciously deciding to do so. She followed the sound up 2 flights of stairs and down a hallway until she stood outside a practice room. Through the small window in the door, she could see a young woman about her age playing with complete absorption. Her eyes were closed and her body swayed slightly with the music. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya watched until the piece ended, then turned and walked away quickly before the woman could see her. But something had shifted. The walls she had built began to crack. She started listening to classical music again, first in small doses, then obsessively. She would put on headphones and listen for hours, letting the music wash over her like a tide. She remembered her mother's hands on the keys. She remembered the feel of the piano bench beneath her, the smell of the wood polish Eleanor used to keep the instrument gleaming. She remembered being happy. Maya's grades began to slip. She could not concentrate on cellular biology when her mind was full of sonatas and concertos. She would sit in lectures and instead of taking notes, she would imagine her fingers moving across invisible keys. Her advisor noticed the change and called her in for a meeting. He asked if everything was all right at home. Maya almost laughed. Nothing had been all right at home for 7 years. But she told him she was fine, just tired, and promised to do better. She did not do better. She began skipping classes to sit in the music building, listening to students practice. She memorized their schedules, knew which practice rooms would be occupied when. She became a ghost haunting the halls, feeding off the music she heard through closed doors. One day, a music professor stopped her in the hallway and asked if she needed help finding something. Maya said she was just passing through. The professor looked at her for a long moment, then said the practice rooms were available to all students if she ever wanted to use one. Maya thanked her and hurried away, but the offer stayed with her. It took 3 more weeks before Maya worked up the courage to reserve a practice room. She signed up for a late-night slot when she knew the building would be mostly empty. She did not want anyone to hear her, to witness what she was about to do. When the time came, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the key in the lock. The practice room was small and plain, containing nothing but an upright piano and a bench. Maya sat down and stared at the keys for a full 10 minutes before she could bring herself to touch them. When her fingers finally made contact, she gasped. It was like touching a live wire. 7 years of suppressed emotion came flooding back all at once. She played a simple C major scale, and tears streamed down her face. Her fingers were stiff and clumsy from disuse, but the muscle memory was still there, buried deep. She played for 2 hours that night, working through scales and simple exercises, crying the entire time. It hurt. It hurt more than she had expected. But it also felt like coming home. Maya began practicing every night. She was starting from scratch, rebuilding technique that had atrophied from years of neglect. Her fingers cramped. Her back ached. She made mistakes constantly. But slowly, painfully, the music came back to her. She worked through beginner books, then intermediate repertoire. She pushed herself relentlessly, as if trying to make up for lost time. The piano professor who had spoken to her in the hallway, Dr. Susan Chen, noticed Maya's name on the practice room sign-up sheets and started leaving sheet music outside the door for her. She never said anything directly, but her message was clear. She was paying attention. 6 months into her nocturnal practice sessions, Dr. Chen knocked on the practice room door during one of Maya's sessions. Maya froze, her hands hovering over the keys. Dr. Chen asked if she could come in. Maya wanted to say no, but found herself nodding instead. Dr. Chen sat in the corner and listened while Maya stumbled through a Beethoven sonatina. When Maya finished, Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked why Maya was not a music major. Maya said it was complicated. Dr. Chen said most things worth doing were complicated. She told Maya about a student recital happening in 3 months and suggested Maya might want to perform. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of performing in front of people terrified her. She had not played for an audience since before her mother died. She had not shared her music with anyone in 7 years. But something in Dr. Chen's expression made her pause. There was no pressure, no judgment, just an invitation. Maya heard herself saying she would think about it. Dr. Chen smiled and left the room, and Maya sat alone with her racing heart and sweating palms. She spent the next week trying to talk herself out of it. She made lists of reasons why performing was a bad idea. She was not good enough. She would embarrass herself. No one wanted to hear her play. But underneath all the excuses was something else, a tiny spark of desire. She wanted to play for people again. She wanted to share the music that had been locked inside her for so long. She wanted to honor her mother's memory in the way Eleanor would have wanted. Maya signed up for the recital. She chose Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece that had drawn her back to music. It was ambitious for someone who had only been playing again for 6 months, but it felt right. This was the piece her mother had been teaching her. This was the piece that represented everything she had lost and everything she was trying to reclaim. She practiced obsessively, sometimes until her fingers bled. Dr. Chen would occasionally stop by to listen and offer gentle corrections, but mostly she let Maya work through things on her own. The night of the recital arrived too quickly. Maya stood backstage, listening to the other students perform. They were all music majors with years of continuous training. They played with confidence and polish. Maya felt like an imposter. She considered leaving, just walking out the back door and never coming back. But then she thought about her mother, about the piano that had been destroyed, about the 7 years of silence. She thought about Patricia's face as she swung that hammer. And something hardened inside her. When her name was called, Maya walked onto the stage on shaking legs. The auditorium was not large, maybe 150 seats, and it was only half full. Most of the audience were other music students and faculty members. Maya sat at the grand piano and adjusted the bench. The stage lights were hot on her face. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. For a moment, she was 15 years old again, sitting at her mother's piano, feeling Eleanor's hands gently correcting her posture. Then she began to play. The first notes were tentative, uncertain. But as the piece progressed, something shifted. Maya stopped thinking about the audience, about her mistakes, about the years of pain. She just played. The music poured out of her, all the grief and anger and longing she had been carrying for 7 years. She played for her mother. She played for her lost childhood. She played for the girl she had been and the woman she was becoming. When she struck the final chord, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the applause began. Maya opened her eyes and blinked in the stage lights. People were standing. Dr. Chen was in the front row with tears on her face. A man in the back was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Maya stood and bowed awkwardly, then fled the stage. She made it to the bathroom before she started crying. She cried for 20 minutes, huge gasping sobs that left her drained and shaking. But underneath the tears was something else. Relief. Joy. A sense of having survived something terrible. Dr. Chen found her in the bathroom and handed her tissues without comment. She told Maya that her playing had been extraordinary, raw and honest in a way that technical perfection could never match. She said Maya had a gift, and that it would be a tragedy to waste it. Then she asked Maya if she had ever considered changing her major to music. Maya said she could not afford to. She was pre-med on a scholarship that required her to maintain a certain GPA in science courses. Switching majors was not an option. Dr. Chen nodded, understanding. But she did not let it drop. Over the following weeks, she worked with Maya to find solutions. There were performance scholarships available. There were ways to double major or add a music minor. There were programs that could help fund private lessons. Dr. Chen was relentless in her advocacy, seeing something in Maya that Maya could not yet see in herself. Slowly, a plan took shape. Maya would stay pre-med but add a music minor. She would continue taking lessons with Dr. Chen. She would perform when opportunities arose. It was not the full commitment Dr. Chen hoped for, but it was a start. Maya's father called once a month, brief conversations that touched on nothing important. He never asked about her music. He never mentioned Patricia or the destroyed piano. They talked about her grades, the weather, his latest research project. The conversations left Maya feeling hollow and angry, though she could not have explained why. She had learned not to expect anything from Robert, but some small part of her still hoped he might surprise her. He never did. In her senior year, Maya received an invitation that changed everything. Dr. Chen forwarded her information about a national competition for young pianists. The prize was a solo performance at Carnegie Hall, plus a significant cash award. Dr. Chen thought Maya should enter. Maya laughed. She said she was not good enough, that she had only been playing seriously again for 2 years, that she would be competing against people who had trained their whole lives. Dr. Chen looked at her steadily and said that talent was not just about technique. It was about having something to say. Maya submitted an application on the last possible day, telling herself she had no chance of being selected. She forgot about it until she received an email 2 months later informing her that she had been chosen as one of 50 semi-finalists. The competition would take place in New York City over a long weekend. Participants would perform a required piece and a piece of their own choosing. Judges would narrow the field to 10 finalists, who would then compete for the top prize. Maya felt sick. She had never performed in a real competition. She had never played in front of judges whose job was to find her flaws. She called Dr. Chen and said she was withdrawing. Dr. Chen showed up at her dorm room an hour later with coffee and determination. She told Maya that fear was normal, that every performer felt it. She said the question was not whether Maya was afraid, but whether she was going to let fear make her decisions. Maya said Patricia had destroyed her relationship with piano once. She was terrified of failing and having it destroyed again, this time by her own inadequacy. Dr. Chen sat with Maya for 3 hours that night. She talked about her own journey as a musician, the failures and rejections and moments of crippling self-doubt. She said that music was not about being perfect. It was about being truthful. She said Maya's playing had truth in it, hard-earned truth that came from surviving real pain. That was worth more than all the technical precision in the world. When she left, Maya sat alone in the dark and thought about what it meant to be truthful. To play truthfully meant playing with the full weight of her history, including the parts that hurt. It meant acknowledging what had been taken from her and what she had fought to reclaim. It was terrifying. But it was also the only way forward. Maya decided to compete. She chose her pieces carefully. The required piece was a Bach prelude and fugue, all mathematical precision and architectural beauty. Her choice piece was the Chopin Nocturne, the one that had brought her back to music. She practiced until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. She visualized the performance, imagining every scenario that could go wrong. She prepared for disaster because disaster was familiar. Success was the unknown that scared her most. The competition weekend arrived with unseasonable cold for April. Maya took a train to New York City, too nervous to focus on the book she had brought. She checked into the budget hotel where participants were housed and lay awake all night listening to the sounds of the city. The next morning, she joined 49 other pianists in a large rehearsal space for the orientation. They were all young, mostly in their early 20s, and they all looked confident in a way Maya did not feel. She listened to them talk about conservatories and master classes and famous teachers. She felt like an imposter. The semi-final rounds took place over 2 days in a beautiful recital hall. Participants performed in random order, and Maya was scheduled for the second afternoon. She sat in the back and listened to the others play. They were technically flawless, their fingers flying over the keys with mechanical precision. The music was beautiful but somehow empty, like looking at a photograph of food instead of tasting it. Maya wondered if that was what the judges wanted. If so, she had no chance. When her turn came, Maya walked to the piano feeling disconnected from her body. She sat down and adjusted the bench. The 3 judges sat at a table in the center of the hall, their faces neutral. She played the Bach first. Her performance was competent but not exceptional. She made a few small errors that no one but another pianist would notice. But she knew. When she finished, the judges thanked her and she moved into the Chopin. This was different. From the first note, Maya was somewhere else. She was in her childhood living room with her mother beside her. She was 15 years old watching Patricia destroy the piano. She was 22 years old touching keys for the first time in 7 years. All of it poured into the music, every moment of joy and grief compressed into 4 minutes of sound. When she finished, the hall was silent. The judges were writing furiously. Maya stood and bowed and walked off stage, convinced she had ruined everything. The results were posted that evening. Maya almost did not look, afraid to confirm her failure. But when she finally forced herself to check the list, her name was there. She was one of 10 finalists. She stood staring at the paper for a full minute, unable to process what she was seeing. Other pianists congratulated her. She heard herself saying thank you, but inside she was reeling. She had made it. Against all odds, she had made it. The final round was the next day. Finalists would perform one 20-minute piece of their choosing. Maya had prepared Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 2, an ambitious and emotionally complex work. It was a piece that required both technical mastery and deep emotional commitment. Dr. Chen had warned her it might be too much, but Maya felt drawn to it. The piece was about transformation, about taking darkness and turning it into beauty. It felt like her story. That night, Maya could not sleep. She lay in her hotel bed reviewing fingerings and passages in her mind. At 3 a.m, she gave up and went down to the hotel lobby. To her surprise, she found 2 other finalists there, both unable to sleep. They ordered coffee and sat together in companionable silence, 3 young musicians united by shared terror and excitement. One of them, a young man named David from Juilliard, asked Maya where she studied. When she said she was pre-med at a state university, both her companions looked shocked. David asked how she had learned to play like that without formal conservatory training. Maya found herself telling them about her mother, about the piano, about Patricia and the hammer. She told them about the 7 years of silence and the painful journey back to music. When she finished, both were quiet. Then David said that explained everything. He said her playing had a quality the rest of them lacked. It came from living, from loss, from understanding that music was not just entertainment. It was survival. Maya had never thought about it that way, but she realized he was right. For her, music was not a career choice. It was the thing that had saved her life. The final round began at noon. Maya was scheduled to perform 8 out of 10. She sat backstage listening to the others, and her confidence wavered with each performance. They were brilliant, every one of them. She heard perfection after perfection, technical displays that left her breathless. How could she compete with that? Her performance would be messy and emotional, full of the flaws that came from late starts and interrupted training. But when her name was called, Maya remembered what Dr. Chen had told her. Truth over perfection. Story over technique. She walked onto the stage holding that thought like a talisman. The Rachmaninoff Sonata was a mountain to climb. It began with dark, brooding chords that spoke of despair and confusion. Maya played them with every ounce of pain she had accumulated over the years. She thought about her mother's death, about standing helpless while her piano was destroyed, about her father's weakness and Patricia's cruelty. The first movement was all of that darkness given voice. But then came the second movement, lyrical and searching. This was the part about trying to find hope in the wreckage, about those first tentative moments of touching a piano again after years away. Maya played it with trembling vulnerability. The third movement was the transformation, fast and furious and ultimately triumphant. This was reclamation. This was refusing to let the pain win. Maya's hands flew over the keys, pulling every bit of passion and determination from deep inside herself. She was not playing for the judges anymore. She was playing for herself, for her mother, for every person who had ever had something precious destroyed and found the courage to rebuild. When she struck the final chord, she was breathing hard and covered in sweat. She had left everything on that stage. The applause was immediate and sustained. Maya stood and bowed, but she barely registered it. She was spent, empty, wrung out like a cloth. She walked off stage in a daze and found a quiet corner backstage where she sat with her head between her knees. Other finalists came and went. The final 2 performances happened. Then came the agonizing wait while judges deliberated. Maya did not hope to win. She had already won by making it this far, by proving to herself that she could do this. Anything beyond that was extra. But when the judges returned and announced the results, Maya's name was called first. She had won. Not just placed, but won. The grand prize, the Carnegie Hall performance, everything. Maya stood frozen while people applauded. David was hugging her. Dr. Chen, who had driven down from campus, was crying in the audience. The judges wanted her to come forward and say something. Maya walked to the front on numb legs. They handed her a certificate and an enormous bouquet of flowers. She was supposed to give a speech, but words would not come. Finally, she managed to whisper a thank you and fled the stage again. The aftermath was chaos. There were photos and interviews. The competition director wanted to know her story for publicity materials. Other performers wanted to congratulate her. Dr. Chen was talking about opportunities and career trajectory. Maya nodded through it all, still in shock. It was not until she was alone in her hotel room that night that the reality hit her. She had done it. She had taken something Patricia destroyed and rebuilt it into something beautiful. She had proven that loss did not have to be permanent, that broken things could be repaired. She cried for hours, but this time the tears were clean, almost joyful. News of Maya's win spread quickly. The competition publicity machine was efficient and thorough. Articles appeared in music journals and local newspapers. Someone uploaded a video of her final round performance to YouTube, and it went viral in classical music circles. Dr. Chen fielded calls from reporters and concert organizers. Maya's inbox filled with messages from strangers telling her how her music had moved them. It was overwhelming and surreal. Maya felt like she was watching it happen to someone else. One message came from her father. He sent a brief email saying he had seen an article about her win and was proud. He made no mention of the piano, no acknowledgement of what his silence had cost her. Maya stared at the email for a long time before deleting it. She was done waiting for Robert to be the father she needed. She was done making excuses for his cowardice. She would move forward without his validation. But she did send a message to Patricia. Not to seek reconciliation or closure, but to let her stepmother know that she had failed. She wrote a single sentence. "The piano you destroyed gave me Carnegie Hall." She attached a link to the competition results and hit send. She did not expect a response and did not receive one. Patricia would see that message and know that her cruelty had not broken Maya, had not stolen her future. That was enough. The Carnegie Hall performance was scheduled for 8 months away, in early December. Maya had the entire summer and fall to prepare. She chose a program of pieces that told her story, beginning with the simple Chopin Nocturne and building to the Rachmaninoff Sonata. She wanted anyone who heard her play to understand the journey, to feel what she had felt, to know that redemption was possible even after the worst losses. She practiced with a focus and intensity that surprised even Dr. Chen. This was her moment, her chance to honor her mother and reclaim everything that had been stolen. She would not waste it. As the performance date approached, the publicity around Maya's story intensified. A major music magazine ran a feature article about her journey from destruction to Carnegie Hall. The story of the stepmother destroying the piano resonated with people. It became a symbol for all the ways families could wound each other, and all the ways people could heal. Maya gave a few carefully selected interviews, telling her story with increasing confidence. She was no longer ashamed of what had happened. It was part of her, part of what made her playing unique. 3 weeks before the Carnegie Hall performance, Maya received an unexpected phone call. It was from a television producer interested in documenting her story for a special segment on artists who overcame adversity. They wanted to film her preparing for the performance, interview her about her past, and capture the Carnegie Hall concert itself. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. She did not want cameras invading her privacy. But Dr. Chen convinced her that sharing her story could help others who had experienced similar losses. Maya reluctantly agreed to a single interview and limited filming of her practice sessions. The interview took place in the university's music building, in the same practice room where Maya had first returned to piano. The producer asked questions about her mother, about the piano's destruction, about the years of silence. Maya answered honestly, letting the camera capture her tears when they came. She talked about how music had saved her, how it had given her a way to process grief that words never could. She talked about Patricia and her father, about the wounds that still had not healed. It was harder than she expected, but also cathartic. When the interview ended, Maya felt lighter somehow, as if telling the story had lessened its power over her. The final week before the performance, Maya barely slept. She practiced until her hands ached, visualized the stage until she could see every detail in her mind. Dr. Chen tried to get her to rest, warning about burnout, but Maya could not stop. She was driven by something beyond rational thought, a need to get this right that consumed her completely. The night before she was supposed to leave for New York, Maya sat at the piano at 2 a.m. and played through her entire program without stopping. Her fingers were sure. Her interpretation was clear. She was ready. Carnegie Hall was everything Maya had imagined and more. The building itself was iconic, steeped in history and significance. Walking through the stage door where legends had walked before her, Maya felt the weight of it. This was not just another performance. This was a statement, a declaration that she had not just survived but triumphed. The stage crew was setting up for her sound check, adjusting lights, and checking the piano. Maya walked out onto the empty stage and looked at the tiers of seats rising up into darkness. Tomorrow night, all those seats would be full. People would be there to hear her play. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. The concert was scheduled for 8 p.m. Maya spent the day in her hotel room, trying to stay calm. Dr. Chen had flown in for the performance, along with several of Maya's friends from college. Sarah, her roommate, sent a text saying she was already in line at the venue. Maya had not invited her father, and he had not asked to come. That relationship was broken beyond repair, and Maya had made peace with it. She was surrounded by people who actually supported her. That was what mattered. At 6 o'clock, Maya made her way to the venue. The stage manager walked her through logistics while hair and makeup people fussed over her appearance. She had chosen a simple black dress that echoed what she had worn at the competition but was slightly more formal. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the broken 15-year-old or the lost college student, but someone new entirely. Someone strong. Someone ready. The hall filled quickly. Maya watched from backstage as people found their seats, the excited buzz of conversation filling the space. The television crew was there, documenting everything. A photographer moved through the audience capturing images. When the lights dimmed for the start of the concert, Maya took a final deep breath and walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and warm. Maya bowed and sat at the piano, taking a moment to center herself. Then she began to play the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had started everything. Her fingers moved across the keys with confidence born from hundreds of hours of practice. The music filled the hall, intimate and emotional. This opening was her introduction, her way of saying this is who I am, this is where I began. When the last notes faded, the applause was respectful but restrained. The audience understood she was telling a story, and they were settling in to hear it. Maya moved through her program, each piece building on the last. She played Debussy and Beethoven, Bach and Schubert. Each composer represented a different aspect of her journey. The emotions shifted from melancholy to hope, from despair to determination. She could feel the audience with her, following where she led. By the time she reached the Rachmaninoff sonata that would close the program, the connection between performer and listeners was palpable. Everyone in that hall was invested in this story now. They wanted to know how it ended. Maya had played the Rachmaninoff sonata dozens of times in practice, but never like this. She poured everything into it, all her history and pain and hard-won joy. The first movement was her mother's death and the piano's destruction, rendered in dark, crashing chords. The second movement was the 7 years of silence, all that suppressed longing and grief given voice. And the third movement was the return, the reclamation, the refusal to let cruelty have the final word. Her hands flew across the keys in the furious final section, and she could feel the audience leaning forward in their seats. When Maya struck the final triumphant chord, there was a suspended moment of absolute silence. Then the entire hall erupted. People leapt to their feet. The applause continued for what felt like an eternity. Maya stood at the piano, trembling from exhaustion and emotion, and bowed again and again as the audience refused to stop clapping. People in the front rows had tears streaming down their faces. Others were embracing each other, overcome by what they had witnessed. Maya could see Dr. Chen in the third row, openly weeping and clapping so hard her hands must have been stinging. The stage lights were hot on Maya's face, but she felt cold inside, emptied out by the performance she had just given. The concert hall manager appeared at the edge of the stage, gesturing that Maya should take another bow. She did, her legs shaking beneath her. Someone in the balcony shouted bravo, and others took up the cry. Maya had heard about moments like this, legendary performances that became part of classical music lore, but she had never imagined being at the center of one. She was just a girl who had lost her mother and spent years running from grief. She was just someone who had found her way back to music through sheer stubbornness and pain. But standing on that stage with hundreds of people celebrating her, Maya felt something shift permanently inside herself. She was allowed to take up space. She was allowed to be seen. Finally, the applause began to fade. Maya left the stage, her dress damp with sweat despite the cool temperature backstage. The moment she was out of sight of the audience, her knees buckled. Stage crew members caught her before she could fall, guiding her to a chair. Someone pressed a bottle of water into her hands. She gulped it down, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. Her hands were cramping from the intensity of the performance, and her back ached from the tension she had been holding. But underneath the physical discomfort was something else, a profound sense of completion. She had done what she came to do. She had told her story through music, and people had heard it. Dr. Chen found her a few minutes later, pushing through the small crowd of well-wishers and staff that had gathered backstage. She pulled Maya into a tight embrace, and Maya let herself be held, something she rarely allowed. When Dr. Chen pulled back, her eyes were red from crying. She told Maya that in 30 years of teaching, she had never heard anyone play with that kind of raw honesty. She said Maya had not just performed music, she had performed transformation itself, and everyone in that hall had felt it. Maya tried to thank her, to express what Dr. Chen's support had meant, but the words caught in her throat. Dr. Chen squeezed her hand and said no thanks were necessary. She said watching Maya reclaim her gift had been the greatest privilege of her career. The next hour was a blur of congratulations and interviews. The television crew wanted reaction shots and follow-up questions. Concert attendees lined up at the stage door hoping for autographs and photographs. Maya moved through it all in a daze, smiling and nodding and signing programs with hands that still trembled. Her friends from college appeared, enveloping her in hugs and excited chatter. Sarah kept saying she could not believe her roommate had just played Carnegie Hall, as if the reality of it had not quite sunk in. For Maya, everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from a great distance. It was nearly midnight before Maya made it back to her hotel. She collapsed on the bed fully dressed, too exhausted to even remove her shoes. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with messages and social media notifications, but she could not bring herself to look at it. She needed silence, needed to process what had just happened. She lay in the dark and replayed the performance in her mind, hearing the music again, feeling the keys under her fingers. She had been so afraid going into it, terrified that she would freeze or forget or somehow fail. But she had not failed. She had done something remarkable. Sleep came fitfully. Maya kept waking up with her heart racing, fragments of dreams mixing with memories of the performance. At one point she dreamed she was 15 again, watching Patricia destroy the piano, but in the dream Maya fought back, physically wrestling the hammer away. She woke with tears on her face and her hands clenched into fists. Even in triumph, the trauma still lived in her body. It would always be part of her, she realized. The key was not to let it define her entire story. Morning brought a flood of media attention that took Maya completely by surprise. The television segment had aired during the night, and apparently it had struck a chord with viewers. Her inbox was overflowing with messages from strangers telling their own stories of loss and recovery. News outlets were requesting interviews. Her performance video was being shared across social media with comments numbering in the thousands. Maya sat in her hotel room scrolling through it all, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected her performance to be noted in classical music circles, but this was something else entirely. Her story had broken through to the mainstream. One message stood out from all the others. It was from a woman named Jennifer who had been in the audience the night before. She wrote that she had lost her daughter to cancer 3 years ago and had not been able to listen to music since, because music had been something they shared. But hearing Maya play had broken through that grief somehow. She had cried through the entire performance, and for the first time since her daughter's death, the tears had felt cleansing rather than destructive. She thanked Maya for the gift of that performance, for showing her that it was possible to hold grief and joy in the same moment. Maya read the message 3 times, tears blurring her vision. This was why music mattered. Not for the awards or recognition, but for moments of connection like this. Dr. Chen called mid-morning to check on Maya and relay some news. Several major concert venues had reached out overnight expressing interest in booking Maya for performances. A recording label wanted to discuss a contract. 2 different conservatories had contacted Dr. Chen about offering Maya full scholarships if she wanted to pursue a graduate degree in music. The opportunities were staggering and slightly terrifying. Maya had been so focused on the Carnegie Hall performance that she had not thought much about what came after. Now the future was opening up in ways she had not imagined. They agreed to meet for lunch to discuss options. Over soup and sandwiches at a quiet restaurant near the hotel, Dr. Chen laid out the various possibilities. Maya could finish her undergraduate degree in pre-med and pursue music on the side. She could switch fully to music and forget about medical school. She could take a gap year to perform and see where it led. There was no wrong answer, Dr. Chen emphasized. Maya had earned the right to choose her own path. But she also cautioned that opportunities like this did not come around often. If Maya wanted to pursue a career as a concert pianist, now was the time to commit to it fully. Maya sat with the weight of that decision. For so long, pre-med had been her plan because it was practical and because it connected her to her father in some twisted way. But did she actually want to be a doctor? Or had she chosen that path because it was the opposite of music, a way to run from what scared her most? The truth was that playing piano made her feel more alive than anything else. When she was at the keys, time disappeared and all her anxiety quieted. She was fully present in a way she never managed to be in her biology classes. The choice was obvious when she looked at it honestly. She told Dr. Chen she wanted to pursue music fully. Not because she was trying to become famous or wealthy, but because it was what called to her most deeply. Dr. Chen smiled and said she had been hoping Maya would say that. They began making plans over the remains of their lunch. Maya would finish her current semester, then take the spring off to perform and audition for graduate programs. Dr. Chen would help her navigate the complexities of the classical music world and make connections with people who could guide her career. It was exciting and overwhelming in equal measure. The rest of Maya's time in New York passed in a whirlwind. She gave several interviews to music journalists, each time refining how she told her story. She met with the recording label representatives, who were enthusiastic about capturing her playing but respected when she said she was not ready to commit yet. She attended a reception hosted by the competition organizers, where she met other classical musicians and industry professionals. Everyone wanted to talk to her, to hear about her unusual path to Carnegie Hall. Maya found herself getting better at the social aspects of being a performer, though it still drained her. On her last day in the city, Maya took a solo walk through Central Park. She needed time alone to process everything that had happened. The December air was cold and crisp, and the park was relatively quiet on a weekday afternoon. She found a bench overlooking a pond and sat watching ducks glide across the water. A week ago she had been terrified about this performance, convinced she would fail. Now her entire life trajectory had changed. She was going to be a pianist, not a doctor. She was going to spend her life making music instead of running from it. The decision felt right in a way few things in her life ever had. Her phone buzzed with yet another message. Maya almost ignored it, but something made her look. It was from her father. The message was longer than his usual terse communications. He wrote that he had seen the television segment about her Carnegie Hall performance and had been unable to stop thinking about it. He said he had not realized how much the piano meant to her, or how much damage Patricia's actions had caused. He wrote that he was sorry for not protecting her, for choosing the path of least resistance instead of standing up for what was right. He said he was proud of what she had accomplished but understood if she did not want to hear from him. It ended with a simple statement that he loved her and always had, even when he had been too cowardly to show it properly. Maya read the message multiple times, trying to figure out how she felt. Part of her wanted to respond with anger, to list all the ways Robert had failed her over the years. Part of her wanted to ignore it entirely, to maintain the distance she had worked hard to establish. But a small part of her, the part that still remembered being a little girl who adored her father, wanted to believe that people could change. She did not respond immediately. This was not something to decide while sitting on a park bench in an emotional state. She would sit with it, think about what she wanted and needed, and respond when she was ready. Or maybe she would not respond at all. Either way, it was her choice to make. Returning to campus after New York felt strange. Maya had been gone less than a week, but she felt like a fundamentally different person. Her dorm room looked smaller than she remembered. Her biology textbooks seemed to belong to someone else's life. She went through the motions of attending classes, but her mind was elsewhere. Her professors noticed the change. A few had seen the news coverage and congratulated her. One asked if she was still planning to take the MCAT in the spring. Maya told him her plans had changed, and she would not be applying to medical school after all. Saying it out loud made it real. The response to her Carnegie Hall performance continued to build in the weeks that followed. The video of her performance reached over 1 million views. Classical music blogs and magazines published think pieces about her story and what it said about resilience and second chances. Maya was invited to perform at several prestigious venues over the next year. A literary agent reached out asking if she would be interested in writing a memoir. It was gratifying but also overwhelming. Maya had not sought fame, she had just wanted to play music again. But apparently her story resonated with people in a way that transcended classical music circles. What surprised Maya most was how many people reached out to share their own stories of things destroyed by family members, of talents suppressed and dreams deferred. She heard from people who had given up painting or writing or singing because someone they loved had convinced them they were not good enough. She heard from people whose parents had thrown away their work or broken their instruments or mocked their ambitions. The common thread in all these stories was the lasting damage of having someone in a position of power try to crush something precious. Many said that seeing Maya's redemption gave them hope that they could reclaim their own abandoned dreams. Maya tried to respond to as many messages as she could, though it quickly became impossible to keep up. She started a small social media presence where she could share updates and occasionally post short videos of herself practicing. She was cautious about it, not wanting to become someone who performed for internet validation. But she also recognized that her visibility gave her a platform to encourage others who were struggling. She posted about the importance of protecting your creative spirit, about how it was never too late to return to something you loved, about how surviving damage did not mean the damage had not been real. The response was immediate and positive. People were hungry for messages of hope. Finals week came and went. Maya's grades were adequate but not stellar. Her focus had been elsewhere all semester. She did not particularly care. She was finishing her degree because she had started it, but her heart was no longer in pre-med. When she handed in her last exam, she felt relieved rather than accomplished. Now she could focus fully on music without the distraction of trying to maintain the fiction that she was going to medical school. The spring semester arrived with new possibilities. Maya was not enrolled in classes, having taken a leave of absence to pursue performance opportunities. She spent January preparing for auditions at several top music graduate programs. The applications required recorded performances, letters of recommendation, and personal statements explaining her background and goals. Writing about her journey was both cathartic and painful. She had to articulate things she had barely processed herself, to make sense of a narrative that still felt raw and incomplete. But the act of writing it down helped her see patterns and meanings she had missed while living through it. February brought a series of performances at various venues around the country. Maya traveled to Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and San Francisco, each time playing for sold-out audiences curious about the pianist they had heard about. The performances went well, though Maya struggled with the constant travel and the pressure of living up to the hype that preceded her. She was still learning how to be a professional performer, how to conserve energy and manage nerves and present herself in interviews. It was exhausting in ways that practicing had never been. In March, acceptance letters started arriving from graduate programs. Maya was admitted to every school she applied to, each with generous funding packages. It was validating but also meant she had to make a difficult choice about where to spend the next 2 years. She visited several campuses, sitting in on classes and meeting potential teachers. Each school had strengths, but she found herself drawn to a program in upstate New York with a renowned piano pedagogy track. She wanted to perform, but she also wanted to teach, to help other students find their way back to music the way Dr. Chen had helped her. She called Dr. Chen to discuss the decision. Her mentor was supportive of whatever Maya chose, but she agreed that the pedagogy focus made sense given Maya's interests. Dr. Chen said that Maya's greatest gift was not just her technical ability, but her capacity to connect emotionally through music and to help others access that same connection. Teaching would allow her to develop both skills simultaneously. Maya felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. She accepted the offer and began making plans to move to New York in the fall. Before the move, there was one more thing Maya needed to do. She decided to return home for a weekend, something she had not done in over 3 years. The house on Maple Street held nothing but painful memories, but Maya felt she needed to face it one more time as the person she had become rather than the person she had been. She called her father to let him know she was coming. Robert sounded surprised but pleased. He did not mention Patricia, and Maya did not ask about her. Some questions were better left unspoken. The drive to her childhood home felt surreal. Maya passed familiar landmarks, places that had once been part of her daily life but now felt like scenery from someone else's past. When she pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller than she remembered. The paint was peeling slightly, and the garden was overgrown. It looked tired and neglected, much like she imagined her father had become. She sat in her car for several minutes, gathering courage, before finally getting out and walking to the front door. Robert answered before she could knock, as if he had been watching for her arrival. He looked older than Maya remembered, his hair completely gray now and his face lined with new wrinkles. They stood awkwardly for a moment before he stepped aside to let her in. The interior of the house had changed significantly. Patricia had clearly redecorated multiple times since Maya left. Everything was sleek and modern and impersonal, like a hotel lobby rather than a home. Maya's eyes went immediately to the living room where her mother's piano had once stood. In its place was a glass and chrome entertainment center. Robert offered her coffee and they sat in the kitchen, a neutral space that held fewer memories. The conversation was stilted at first, circling around safe topics like Maya's performance schedule and Robert's research. But eventually, Maya steered them toward harder territory. She asked him directly why he had never stood up to Patricia, why he had let her destroy the piano without consequences. Robert was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. He said that after Eleanor died, he had been lost in his own grief and had not known how to be a father to a grieving daughter. Meeting Patricia had been an escape, a way to avoid dealing with his own pain and Maya's. He had convinced himself that moving forward quickly was healthy, that bringing a new person into their lives would help them heal. But he admitted now that it had been cowardice. He had chosen his own comfort over his daughter's well-being. He said there was no excuse for what Patricia had done, and no excuse for him allowing it. He said he had thought about it every day since, especially after seeing how music had returned to Maya's life. Maya listened without interrupting. Part of her appreciated the apology, inadequate though it was. But another part of her remained angry at the wasted years, at the childhood she had lost to grief and neglect. She told her father that his apology did not change what had happened, but she acknowledged that he seemed genuinely remorseful. She said she was not sure they could have a real relationship again, that too much damage had been done. But maybe they could find a way to be in each other's lives in some limited capacity. It was more than she had expected to offer, and she could see relief wash over Robert's face. Before she left, Maya asked where Patricia was. Robert said they had separated 8 months ago, that Patricia had left him for someone younger and wealthier. He said it with no emotion, as if reporting a mundane fact. Maya felt nothing at the news. Patricia had already taken up too much space in her life. Learning that her stepmother's marriage had failed did not bring Maya satisfaction or closure. It was simply information, neither particularly relevant nor interesting. She told Robert she hoped he found happiness eventually, and she meant it. She did not need him to suffer, she just needed to protect herself from being hurt again. Driving away from the house for what she knew would probably be the last time, Maya felt surprisingly light. She had gone back expecting to be overwhelmed by memories and trauma, but instead she found that the place held less power over her than she had thought. It was just a house. Her real home was wherever she could make music, wherever she felt connected to her mother's memory and her own authentic self. She did not need her father's house or his approval. She had built a life without either, and it was a good life, one she had earned through struggle and perseverance. The months between spring and fall passed quickly. Maya performed regularly, building a reputation as a thoughtful and emotionally resonant interpreter of romantic and contemporary classical music. Critics praised her technical skill but focused more on the depth of feeling she brought to each piece. One reviewer wrote that listening to Maya Hartley play was like watching someone bare their soul in real time, uncomfortable and transcendent in equal measure. Maya took that as high praise. She had no interest in being a technically perfect but emotionally distant performer. She wanted people to feel something when they heard her play, even if that something was painful. In August, Maya moved into a small apartment near her new graduate school campus. The place was modest but had good light and enough space for her to set up a practice area. She bought a used upright piano from a retiring professor, nothing fancy but serviceable for daily practice. The first time she sat down to play in her new home, she thought about her mother's Yamaha that Patricia had destroyed. That piano was gone forever, but the music it had held lived on in Maya's hands and heart. Patricia had destroyed an object, but she had not destroyed what the object represented. That could not be taken or broken. Graduate school was demanding in ways Maya had not fully anticipated. Her fellow students were all serious musicians with years of conservatory training. The technical gap between them and Maya was sometimes obvious, especially in areas like music theory and history where her education had been interrupted. But Maya worked harder than anyone, practicing until her fingers were numb and staying up late to study scores. She was determined to prove that she belonged there, that her unconventional path did not make her less capable. Her teachers recognized her dedication and the unique perspective she brought to her interpretations. Her primary piano instructor, a stern Russian émigré named Professor Volkov, initially seemed skeptical of Maya's abilities. But after hearing her play Rachmaninoff, he softened considerably. He told her that technique could be taught, but the ability to access genuine emotion through music was rare and precious. He said Maya had that ability in abundance, and his job was simply to give her the technical tools to express it more fully. Under his demanding but fair guidance, Maya's playing evolved in new directions. The pedagogy coursework proved even more valuable than Maya had hoped. She learned about different teaching methodologies, about how to work with students of varying ages and abilities, about the psychology of performance anxiety and creative blocks. Everything she learned felt directly applicable to her own experience. She began to understand her journey in new terms, to see how trauma had affected her relationship with music and how intentional work had helped her heal that relationship. She wrote papers exploring the intersection of grief and creativity, of loss and artistic expression. Her professors found her work insightful and original. In her second semester, Maya was given the opportunity to teach beginner piano to local children as part of her teaching practicum. She approached it with both excitement and trepidation. Working with young students meant potentially encountering kids who reminded her of herself at that age, and she was not sure she was ready for that emotional complexity. But the first day of teaching proved transformative. She had 5 students ranging from age 6 to 10, all eager and nervous and clutching brand new sheet music books. Maya saw herself in each of them, and instead of pain, she felt purpose. She taught them more than just notes and rhythms. She taught them that music was a language for expressing things words could not capture. She taught them that making mistakes was part of learning, not something to be ashamed of. She taught them that their instruments were friends, not adversaries. Most importantly, she taught them that their music belonged to them and could never be taken away by anyone, no matter what happened in their lives. Some of the children had difficult home situations. One boy's parents were divorcing. One girl had recently lost a grandparent. Maya recognized the signs of grief and trauma, and she made sure those children knew their feelings were valid and that music could be a safe space to explore them. Word spread about Maya's teaching approach, and soon she had a waiting list of students. Parents told her that their children were more excited about piano lessons than they had been about anything in months. One mother said her shy daughter had started composing her own simple melodies and performing them for the family. Maya felt she was doing something genuinely meaningful, giving these children tools that might serve them throughout their lives. This was the redemption that mattered most, not the Carnegie Hall performance or the media attention, but the quiet work of helping young people find their voices through music. Her own performing career continued alongside her studies and teaching. She gave recitals on campus and occasional concerts at venues around the region. She was developing a signature style that critics described as intensely personal and unflinchingly honest. Some people loved it and others found it too emotionally raw. Maya did not particularly care about the negative reviews. She was not trying to be universally liked, she was trying to be authentic. The people who connected with her playing really connected, and that was enough. In the spring of her first year of graduate school, Maya received an unexpected invitation. A documentary filmmaker had been following her story since Carnegie Hall and wanted to create a feature-length film about her journey. The project would involve extensive interviews with Maya and the people in her life, as well as filming her in performance and teaching. The filmmaker, a woman named Rebecca who had lost her own mother young, felt deeply connected to Maya's story and wanted to handle it with care and nuance. Maya was initially resistant, but Rebecca's passion and understanding won her over. She agreed to participate, with the stipulation that she would have input on the final edit. The filming process was emotionally exhausting but also illuminating. Rebecca asked questions that forced Maya to examine aspects of her story she had not fully processed. They talked about the complicated nature of family trauma, about how love and damage often came from the same sources. They explored the idea of inherited grief, how Maya's father had passed his inability to cope with loss down to his daughter. They discussed the role of women in the story, how Eleanor's death had created a void that Patricia tried to fill in all the wrong ways, and how Dr. Chen had provided the maternal guidance Maya desperately needed. Rebecca also interviewed Dr. Chen, Robert, and several of Maya's students and fellow musicians. She even tracked down Patricia, who initially refused to participate but eventually agreed to a brief interview. Maya did not watch that footage, she did not need to hear Patricia's justifications or explanations. but Rebecca told her that Patricia had seemed uncomfortable and defensive, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the harm she had caused. It confirmed what Maya already knew: some people never accepted responsibility for their actions. Maya had to make peace with that rather than waiting for an apology that would never come. The documentary premiered at a major film festival in the fall of Maya's second year of graduate school. She attended with Dr. Chen and a few close friends, nervous about how her story would be received. The film was titled Broken Keys, a reference both to the destroyed piano and to Maya's own fractured relationship with music. Rebecca had structured it chronologically, beginning with home video footage of young Maya playing piano with her mother, then moving through the tragedy and trauma to the eventual return and triumph. The Carnegie Hall performance footage was interwoven throughout, serving as a thematic anchor. When the lights came up after the screening, there was not a dry eye in the theater. The audience gave the film a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. During the Q&A session that followed, people asked Maya about how she had found the strength to return to music, about her relationship with her father, about her advice for others dealing with family trauma. Maya answered as honestly as she could, emphasizing that healing was not linear and that there was no single right way to process grief or reclaim what had been lost. She said the most important thing was to refuse to let other people's damage define your entire story. Broken Keys went on to play at festivals around the world and eventually secured distribution for theatrical release and streaming. The response was overwhelming. Maya's already high profile increased exponentially. She was invited to speak at conferences about trauma and creativity. Universities asked her to give masterclasses and keynote addresses. Therapy organizations reached out about using her story as a case study for resilience. It was gratifying but also sometimes felt like too much. Maya had to learn to set boundaries, to say no to opportunities that did not align with her values or that would drain her energy without giving back. Throughout all the external success and recognition, what mattered most to Maya was the work itself. She completed her master's degree with a recital that showcased her growth as both a performer and interpreter. Professor Volkov told her it was one of the finest student recitals he had heard in his 30 years of teaching. Maya was accepted into a doctoral program that would allow her to continue developing as a performer while also pursuing research on music pedagogy and trauma-informed teaching. She was building exactly the career she wanted, one that balanced performance with education and personal growth. On the anniversary of her Carnegie Hall performance, Maya organized a special concert at her graduate school. The proceeds would go to fund music lessons for children from low-income families, continuing the charitable work she had started with her competition prize money. She invited her students to perform alongside her, giving them experience with a supportive audience. The youngest, a 6-year-old named Lily who reminded Maya painfully of herself, played a simple folk song arrangement with complete concentration. When she finished, she looked up at Maya with such pride and joy that Maya had to blink back tears. Maya closed the concert with the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had brought her back to music years ago. But this time, playing it felt different. There was less pain in it now, more peace. She had carried her grief for so long that it had become part of her identity. But slowly, incrementally, she was learning to hold it differently. The loss of her mother would always be with her, and the trauma of the piano's destruction had left permanent marks. But those experiences no longer defined her entirely. She was more than her wounds now. She was someone who had survived and even thrived, someone who had taken brokenness and created something beautiful from it. After the concert, as Maya greeted audience members and accepted congratulations, she noticed an elderly woman waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. When they finally made eye contact, the woman approached and introduced herself as Elizabeth, Eleanor's piano teacher from decades ago. She said she had seen the documentary and realized that the girl she had taught briefly before Eleanor's death was the same person who had played Carnegie Hall. She had come tonight hoping to speak with Maya, to tell her that Eleanor would have been impossibly proud of the musician and person her daughter had become. Maya invited Elizabeth to her apartment after the concert, and they stayed up late into the night talking about Eleanor. Elizabeth shared stories Maya had never heard, about her mother as a young woman full of dreams and determination, about how much Eleanor had loved music and how much she had loved being Maya's first teacher. Elizabeth said that Eleanor used to talk about Maya's natural gift for expressing emotion through music, how even as a small child Maya could make people feel something when she played. It was clear that Maya had inherited not just talent but also her mother's capacity for emotional depth and connection. Before Elizabeth left, she gave Maya something unexpected. It was a recording Eleanor had made years ago, shortly before Maya was born. Elizabeth had been helping Eleanor prepare for a small recital, and they had recorded the practice session for review. The tape had been in Elizabeth's attic for years, forgotten until the documentary reminded her of its existence. She thought Maya should have it, a chance to hear her mother play one more time. Maya waited until she was alone to listen to the recording. The quality was poor, the tape old and degraded. But through the hiss and static, she could hear her mother's playing, bright and joyful and technically impressive. Eleanor had been a skilled pianist in her own right, not professional caliber perhaps but deeply musical. Maya listened to the entire tape twice, crying through both playings. It was the closest she could come to being with her mother again, this fragile audio connection across the years. She thought about how both she and Eleanor had loved the same thing, had found meaning and purpose in creating beauty through music. It felt like a sacred inheritance, one that no one could destroy no matter how hard they tried. The next morning, Maya woke with unusual clarity about what she wanted to do next. She had been so focused on surviving and then on succeeding that she had not thought much about her larger purpose. But now it was obvious. She wanted to create a music program specifically for children and teenagers who had experienced trauma or loss. She wanted to give them what Dr. Chen had given her, a safe space to explore difficult emotions through music, a way back to themselves when everything felt broken. She spent the next several months developing the concept and securing funding. She wrote grants and reached out to trauma specialists and music therapists. She created a curriculum that integrated traditional music instruction with emotional support and community building. She found a space to rent, a small studio with room for individual lessons and group classes. She called the program Phoenix Keys, a name that captured the idea of rising from ashes, of transformation through art. The first session of Phoenix Keys began with just 8 students, ages 10 to 17. Each had experienced significant loss or trauma, from parental death to abuse to displacement. Maya worked with them individually and as a group, teaching them piano basics while also creating space for them to talk about their experiences and feelings. Some sessions involved as much conversation as music. Other sessions were pure playing, letting the instruments speak what words could not. Maya brought in guest speakers, including therapists who specialized in grief work and other musicians who had used their art to heal from trauma. The transformation she witnessed in her students over that first year was profound. A 14-year-old boy who came in angry and shut down gradually opened up, his rigid posture softening as he learned to express his rage through powerful, crashing chords instead of violence. A 12-year-old girl who had witnessed domestic violence discovered that she could play her fear into the piano and then watch it dissipate into sound waves, no longer trapped in her body. An 11-year-old whose father had died suddenly found that composing simple melodies gave him a way to communicate with the parent he had lost too soon. Maya's own healing deepened as she watched these young people reclaim their voices through music. Every breakthrough they experienced felt like a small vindication, proof that what Patricia had tried to destroy could not just be restored but multiplied. For every key Patricia had broken, Maya was giving dozens of children access to keyboards and the skills to use them. The irony was not lost on her. Patricia's cruelty had inadvertently created this ripple effect of healing and growth. Maya had taken the worst thing that happened to her and transformed it into something that helped others. That felt like the truest victory of all. News of Phoenix Keys spread, and Maya began receiving inquiries from other communities about how to replicate the model. She started training other musicians in her approach, creating a network of trauma-informed music teachers. She wrote articles and gave presentations about the intersection of music education and healing. What had started as a personal project was becoming a movement, a recognition that music could be a powerful tool for processing difficult experiences and rebuilding damaged sense of self. In the third year after her Carnegie Hall performance, Maya was invited to give a TED Talk about her journey and her work with Phoenix keys. Standing on that red circle, looking out at the audience, she felt the full weight of how far she had come. She talked about being 15 years old watching her piano being destroyed, about the years of silence, about the painful return to music. She talked about Carnegie Hall and the documentary and all the external markers of success. But then she shifted to talk about her students, about what she had learned from them, about how giving to others had completed her own healing in ways she had not anticipated. She ended the talk with a simple message. Broken things could be repaired. Silenced voices could be restored. No one had the power to permanently destroy another person's light, they could only make it harder to find and rekindle. But with support and courage and stubborn refusal to give up, people could come back from almost anything. She had watched her students do the same. The audience gave her a standing ovation, but Maya barely noticed. She was thinking about her mother, about the piano that had been destroyed, about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. She had not just survived, she had created meaning from her suffering. And that, finally, was enough. 5 years after Carnegie Hall, Maya stood in her newly opened community center. Phoenix Keys now occupied an entire floor, helping traumatized children heal through music. Her doctoral dissertation on trauma-informed pedagogy was changing music education worldwide. She had composed her own piece, Elegy and Resurrection, premiered tonight to thunderous applause. Her students filled the front rows, living proof that destruction could be transformed into purpose. Patricia had tried to silence her, but Maya had created symphonies. Every child who touched these piano keys defied that cruelty. This was redemption, not a single moment but sustained commitment to choosing light over darkness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.